Hello, good evening, or maybe good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this About Magi Astrology webinar. The plan for today is, first I'm going to tell you what is Magi Astrology, why it is so special, why I'm so keen about it. Second, I will explain you the nature of my offering, what I've done about Magi Astrology, because there are many sources of information, what's special about my offering. The third, I will share with you some of my personal experiences with Magi Astrology and show you how it managed to convince me that although this is a simplified kind of astrology, that it's very important and can be, in fact, very insightful. So what is Magi Astrology? I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me, by the way. If something is wrong, please. There are some. Have a look around. This is a new platform for me. I'm using Webinar Ninja. It might be not perfect, but it seems to be good enough. Have a look around the video window. You will see below some interface for questions, for polls. I might be not running any polls today. Thank you, Malin. Thank you. And there is a button named Offers. Under this button, you will see my offers, but I will explain what those offers are in due course. Feel free to use the chat window. I have an assistant here who will be helping me to do everything at once, hopefully. So, what is Magi Astrology? It's a very special kind of astrology in two ways. First, it's greatly simplified. It doesn't use any astrological houses. Students who are new to astrology, students of my Astrological Forecasting for Everyone course already know about astrological houses. And that's even too much. To start with Magi Astrology, you don't need any houses at all. They're not using houses. They're not using the signs of the zodiac. They only use the zodiac like to pinpoint where the planet is on the sky, in the sky, because zodiac can be used as a ruler to measure the longitude of the planet in the sky. So Magi Astrology doesn't use the qualities of the sign of the zodiac. And the most probably shocking thing for many astrologers, they don't use the moon, because the rules of Magi Astrology were derived from a huge body of research into tens of thousands of charts or data records of successful people. You can't get the time of birth for all those people. You might not even be able to get the place of birth. So when you don't know the time of birth or the place of birth, you can't use the moon. And the rules of Magi Astrology do not use the moon. So the upside of this is that you can, if your client doesn't know his or her birth time, you can use Magi Astrology just fine. That's not a problem. And what's unique, let me show you some of my slides. I hope you can see my slides. Yes, so it doesn't use the moon, but it uses aspects, and it pays a lot of attention to aspects. Aspects are the main thing which is used in Magi Astrology, basically. And it not only it uses the aspects of longitude, which are the aspects known to every astrology pretty much. Trines, squares, conjunctions, those are the aspects of longitude. Excuse me. Magi Astrology also uses the aspects of declination, which are parallel and contraparallel. and it pays a lot of attention to these aspects. It says that they're very, very important. And later in this webinar, I will show you an example which will hopefully prove that aspects of declination are indeed very important, even for traditional astrologers, not only for major astrologers. Also, major astrology, although it's simplified in many ways, it uses some advanced things which are seldom or never used in contemporary astrology. For example, it uses midpoints, which some schools of astrology also use. But major astrology uses midpoints in declination, which I've never heard of anyone using. They do use them. And they also pay a lot of attention to planetary configurations. You know, probably grand trines, grand crosses, and T-squares, those configurations, but that's not the only kind of configurations used in major astrology. They also use some unique configurations named quads, which are formed, it's just a symmetric arrangement, I could say, in simple words, which is formed by lines but not aspect. But that will be the topic of the third webinar of the series of the second paid webinar. I will tell you a little bit later about that. What's unique about major astrology is that it gives specific answers to some of the most vital questions people can ask. Many varieties of astrology, many kinds of astrology are just too complex. You created a natal chart and then the client asks you, how could I earn some money? And you're thinking, for God's sake, what do I answer? Where do I find an answer in this chart? It might be tricky. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more difficult. Or where do I find my love? What is my best partner? And so on. Traditional astrology has so many different rules, sometimes contradicting rules, that it might be not easy to give a specific answer. But major astrology is different because it was specially geared or created to give specific answers. It's got specific rules which help you to give an answer to the most important questions about business, about success, about love. This is what makes this kind of astrology unique. A few questions, just as an example. How to be successful? What are my talents? How to find a great partner? Major astrology can answer these questions, and it will teach you how to do that. An important concept in major astrology is super aspects. I already mentioned that aspects are very important, and they're studied in major astrology in a very detailed way. And there is a group of aspects which are special. Initially, in the very first book of Magi Society, there is a group of 12 aspects which are called super aspects. And the idea, how these aspects were found. Basically, they took tens of thousands of successful people and just checked which aspects can be seen in the charts of those people more often than average, more often than usual. And as a result, they came to this conclusion that these 12 aspects are very special, because if they exist in the natal chart, they greatly increase the probability of success of this person. And the more of these super aspects, the greater are the chances for success, and the higher level of success that can be achieved. And they also found that successful people have usually several of these super aspects. As an example of a super aspect is the very special of them which is called super success aspect. It's an aspect between Jupiter and Pluto, but not every aspect. Not every aspect between Jupiter and Pluto. Magi Astrology defines so-called enhancement, which we'll study in detail in the next webinar, but basically it's either conjunction or trine or parallel or contra-parallel, one of these four aspects. Between Jupiter and Pluto is a super success aspect. It's very special, it's crucial for financial success, for achievements in big business and in competitive sports. And the richest people of the world in the world have these aspects. For example, of 6 most richest people in the United States, 5 have excuse me, this super success aspect, and the 6 have also this aspect, but slightly different. We'll discuss that in the next webinar, what can be the differences. But just one example, Bill Gates has a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto. So, you know, the richest man in the world. And not only aspects themselves, an aspect is something which happens between 2 planets, but there are planetary configurations which are richer and more complex than aspects. They can be formed by 3 planets, 4 planets, more than 4 planets. And those special configurations can give us some very interesting specific information about the person. They can show what's this person's talent and what kind of skills this person could use to reach some success in the world. And that's another very powerful feature of Magi Astrology and what it teaches us. Another very, very important area is how to find success in marriage or partnership and in life in general. And there is I would say it's a discovery. They made a discovery that there is a driving force behind personality, and with different people this driving force is different. In some cases the main driving force is sexuality, and in the other cases the main driving force is romance, and they're very different. If one person is sexually driven and the second person in the marriage is romantically driven, they might find it difficult to live together for long because they have different expectations. Traditionally, it is considered that men usually are more sexually driven, women are more romantically driven, but that's not always the case. Magi Astrology gives us specific criteria which we can use to figure out whether this person is sexually driven or romantically driven. And they give in their 3rd book, I will show you their books a little bit later, in their 3rd book, they give an example of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, how they couldn't live together for long, because Prince Charles is, you can see this from his chart, he's very strongly sexually driven, whereas Princess Diana has very strong romantic aspects. So there was a problem between them. And the current wife of Prince Charles is very strongly sexually driven, the same as Prince. So they have a much stronger relationship as a result of this. Magi Astrology also has a sophisticated, rich system of evaluating people's compatibility. And it can be evaluated on different levels. It can be sexual compatibility, romantic, or business compatibility. Different levels. And one feature I like the most is the idea that, for example, you want to reach success in business, but you don't have that super success aspect. Is everything lost for you? Magi Astrology says no. Because if you don't have a specific aspect, you can you can find a partner with whom together you will form the aspect you need for success, and you will succeed both together. I think this is a very powerful idea and very, very important. Elections is a traditional art in astrology, is the art of selecting the best day for different initiatives, like for creating an enterprise, for opening a shop, for establishing a city, or getting married, for different concerns. And there are traditional rules for elections, but those rules are very multi-layered, they're very complex, sometimes contradictory. And if you use all those rules, you will never actually find the perfect date, because always there will be some kind of voting. Some factors will be for this event, some factors will be against of it, and it can be very difficult to use. Magi Astrology simplifies elections very substantially. It just says, you know, these are the good aspects for getting married, for example. The more you have of them, the more precise they are, the better the day for getting married. And these are the aspects you should avoid, usually the aspects of Saturn. Please don't get married when you have this aspect. So it's all the matter of selecting the day with the most beneficial aspects. It becomes much, much easier, much more simple. The body of knowledge of Magi Astrology is represented firstly by their 3 books. They were published at different times. The very first book, Astrology Really Works, was published, I think it's in the middle of the 1990s. It introduced Magi Astrology for the first time. The second book is the Magi Society Ephemeris. It took quite a lot of time for me to collect all these books over the years. And it's got some very special ephemeris created specially to implement the methods of Magi Society, but it also has a very important theoretical part here. The third book is The Key to Success in Love and Money. And this is the third book I was able to obtain many years ago. And I've read it so many times, extracting knowledge from it. There are also a number of websites. You can start from magiastrology.com, and starting from it, or just searching the internet, you can find the other websites. So there is, you can also become a member of the Magi Society, and a whole new world of knowledge will be opened for you. The problem is, all this knowledge is basically all over the place, I would say. That was my impression when reading books, going to websites. So I spent years extracting the most valuable bit of knowledge, bringing them together into a system, creating a coherent system of teaching, how to teach the ideas of Magi Astrology in the most compact, easy to understand, easy to digest way. And this is basically what I am going to do on my webinars. It's going to be a series of webinars. Initially, my plan was to say, okay, I've got 10 webinars, so you can purchase all the series, and here you go. And we'll conduct them gradually. But then I understood that I had 10 topics. And when I started filling them with all the information I have collected over the years, some of them were just too big for one webinar. They started splitting into a few different webinars. And currently I decided I will do it like this. I have the topics for the first 2 paid webinars. I will tell you the topics. The very first paid webinar will be already tomorrow. on the 11th of August. After that, let me show you the slides so that all the information was in front of you. So yeah, once again, about what I'm offering: simple, logical, easy to learn body of knowledge, series of webinars, each about a specific topic. And one of the ideas which I'm going to implement during my webinars is that I might offer you to submit your chart for consideration during the next webinar. And then it might be very interesting for you to see how the rules of Magi Astrology work for you personally. So the very first webinar will be about aspects in Magi Astrology. As aspects are so important in it, there is quite a lot of information we need to learn about them. Different details, different nuances, orbs, and so on. Super aspects, aspects of Chiron. There is quite a lot of information, but sufficient for the first webinar. It's the main building blocks. The next level of building blocks is planetary configurations, including midpoints, quads, and of course the usual symmetric configurations. These are the first two webinars. They will lay the foundation, and then I'm going just go through the topics: business, love, sports, relationships, stock market, gambling, doing it in such a way that one webinar had enough information but not too much to discuss a specific topic, to look at the examples. That's the plan. The idea is to yeah, about the payment. I decided that the fee of $30 per webinar will be sufficient for me, and I'm planning to run these webinars approximately once a week. It might be difficult to keep this rhythm in the very beginning. You know, Mercury is going retrograde. I'm still completing the Russian version of astrological forecasting for everyone, but I think that by the middle of September I will establish this rhythm, and there will be 12, maybe more webinars, and I will be charging just per webinar as it comes, without any upfront fees. One of the very interesting and important peculiarities, I would say, of Magi Astrology is that it is very algorithmic, which means it has the rules, specific rules, which I, as a programmer, can more or less easily implement. And I had an experience implementing these rules in a piece of software, which only was at that time available in Russian. So sorry, I will be showing you something you won't be able to read, but the pictures are, well, more or less self-descriptive, I would say, or I will comment on them. This was a program, a computer program, implementing the laws of the Magi Astrology at a specific for a specific topic. The program was called this software, the Formula of Love. What is the Formula of Love? It was a title of a very popular Russian movie, where it's a bit a strange movie. It's about some magician or alchemist who was trying to find the secret formula to create love. So this app was like an implementation of that secret formula, but the formula comes from Magi Astrology. It was showing first, in this first screen, the potential of the day. So because Magi Astrology allows us to estimate romantic potential of the day separately from the sexual potential of the day, separate from harmonic potential of the day. I'm showing here all these three potentials, and you can switch the date, you can see them for any day, for tomorrow, for the day after tomorrow, for any day. Then the second screen shows all those important aspects for many years as graphs, when those super aspects are happening in your life, when special doors open for you. You can see here for many years, or you can see them on a different scale for a few months here. And the third screen was the estimation of partnership potential. You can enter the data for your partner and estimate romantic potential of this relationship, sexual potential, stability, and business potential as well. So that was my very first attempt. It was reasonably successful. What I'm working on now, I've got a project. It's just a heads up. It's not ready for any prime time or anything. I have a project which I called Club Galactica. The idea behind this project is a members-only website which will have inside first all those little apps which make Lunarium, my website, so popular. Tens of thousands of people come there daily. And one of the most popular features is the lunar calendar. And there are two of them, the gardening one and the normal one. And it's a bit messy, it's a bit inefficient. So I'm going to create premium versions of all those apps. And there will be no ads, there will be no promotions, just clean premium content. And also, I'm planning to offer all these apps implementing Magi Astrology for different tasks, like this formula of love for romantic, for love relationships, formula of business maybe, or something like that, for business relationships and business projects, and so on, so that you didn't have to dig into charts, compare different charts, transits, and so on. You can press the button, enter the date, and you can see nice graphs clearly showing you what's the best time for this or that. That's one of my plans. Now, let me see. What I'm going to tell you the next is some of my life stories which made me an enthusiastic believer and user of Magi Astrology. At some point when more than a decade ago, I was reading this book, Love and Money, for the first time. I found that Magi Society introduced Chiron into their astrology. And they were writing about it like Chiron is the most important of planets in the world. And I wasn't comfortable with that because my background in astrology is strongly traditional. And I believe that the most important planets are the 7 visible, okay? And if we take also higher planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, it's more than enough. If we understand what they're telling us, that's already great. And now I'm told here is Chiron, and it's more important than any other planet. And I didn't like that. I didn't believe that. Chiron isn't even a planet, it's a planetoid and so on. But then I had an interesting experience that changed my viewpoint very significantly. So what happened? I had an aspect from Chiron to my natal chart. It was a trine of transiting Chiron to my natal Jupiter. And according to Magi Astrology, this is one of the most important aspects. It's similar to the super success aspect, Jupiter-Pluto, but it's even better in some ways. You see, Chiron looks like a key. And in some way, it does work like a key. It unlocks, it opens for us some doors which we never knew existed in the first place. And that's exactly what happened in my life. That was, I had this trine from Chiron to Jupiter, culminating in the end of March, beginning of April 2005. And what happened then? The process started several months before, so the orb was probably quite wide. What happened, I was, at that time, I lived in Russia, and I felt like in a dead end with my life. I didn't know where I'm going, what's happening, what I'm going to do. And then we had holidays. I was already over 40, too late to start a new career, and I wasn't happy with, I was just working as a journalist, traveling, scuba diving, writing articles about that. It was interesting, but it wasn't me. And then I met my friends during holidays in Cornwall, my English friends, and they told me, why don't you try to go to British University and study something? And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea, but I didn't think about it that seriously. But after coming home, after a few months, that idea started to occupy my mind more and more. And at some point, a few months before the culmination of that aspect, I found out that there is a special program in Scotland, it was at that time, called Fresh Talent Scheme. The idea was that if you graduate from a Scottish university, then you get like 2 years of working in the UK, no questions asked, no further paperwork. There was such a program. So I thought I could use this program and see what happens. So I decided to go to a Scottish university and to study computing, because I was always a keen programmer through my whole life. And in the end of January 2005, I came to Glasgow and started the course, MSc in one of the areas of computing, Master of Science. And what happened when the aspect culminated, Chiron, Trine, Jupiter, I want to show you some photos. This is an ugly place, I agree, but this is where I kept my car in the suburbs of Moscow. This is where everything started. This is my car in a garage. And this is the next moment. From the suburbs of Moscow, we came to Helsinki, driving this car, and boarded a ferry. This is our ferry, with all the stuff we were driving with all the household stuff in the car. This is on board the ferry. This is inside the ferry. And here we came to Stockholm the next day. We spent a little bit of time in Stockholm. And then in one day we crossed the whole Sweden and came to Gothenburg. This is already Gothenburg. Gothenburg. And in Gothenburg we boarded another ferry. Inside that ferry, and here we are. We came to Glasgow. All of us came to Glasgow. This is my car parked near an apartment building in North Kelvinside in Glasgow, where we lived for a while and where I studied in the university. So that was amazing. I'm a clumsy driver, to be honest. To drive for so many days across, taking ferries across different seas, that was an amazing achievement for me. And this was the first time the aspect from Chiron to Uranus happened. But as you know, slow aspects, they happen several times. And when this aspect happened for the second time, what happened then? I was already there in Glasgow. I was studying my MSc. I had an MSc dissertation for one of the web frameworks, which were cutting edge at that time in 2005, and I was quite proud about that. So, but I wanted my dissertation project to be real, not some toy application, you know, not just a university project, something real life. So I contacted Alois Trindle, the owner of astro.com, famous astrological website. And I told him, look, I'm an astrologer and I'm also a student of computing in Glasgow, and I'm doing my dissertation on this advanced Java web framework. Maybe you want me to create for you some project. I could do it even for free or for some payment, I don't know. And he told me, yeah, I have something in mind. And at that time, he was thinking of creating a dating agency, basically, or dating website, astrology-based dating website. And he told me, look, this is a very successful dating website, non-astrological, just one of the popular websites. Can you create a full functional copy of it for me using your Java web framework? And to agree on this project, he actually came to Glasgow to see me for a few days. That was amazing. A person like Alois Trindle, unbelievable, came to Glasgow to make this agreement with me. And after that, I was working for him for about half a year, building this system, and he was paying me decent money. I was able to buy a house because of this income, and that was just unbelievable. And that was the second transit of Chiron making trine to my natal Jupiter. And the third time this transit happened, what was then? Alois changed his mind by that time. He decided there are some ethical issues with having those dating agents. So he decided to put this project on the shelf. And suddenly I had no income, but I had a house to pay for. So I had to find something. And how do you think, how easy it can be for a student in Glasgow to find some income? As a student, I couldn't work actually in the UK. It's virtually impossible, especially for a 40+ years old student. But I decided I could write a book on computing, okay, and find a publisher. How think what were my chances? But the reality was I found a publisher in Canada who was actually looking for someone to write for him a book on some obscure Java technology. And I volunteered, and he paid me some royalties. The book wasn't that successful, but he paid me enough to survive until the graduation. And after graduation, I had no problems with jobs or anything. I was offered the job immediately. So that's how all it happened. And it was quite amazing. And after that, I thought, wow. The interesting thing about this Chiron is that you can really feel like some door opens for you, because what happened? That fresh talent scheme, Scottish fresh talent scheme I mentioned, it existed for a very brief period of time. The next year it was already cancelled. It's like the door opened, I was told go, and I went, and then it was closed. And also I got that immigration status, highly skilled migrant, and that scheme was also cancelled very soon after I got it. It was just, doors were opening and closing, and Chiron was telling me just go ahead. That was amazing. Since then I became much less rigid in my approach to astrology, and I'm ready to listen to different schools and to try their methods. And I think Magi Astrology has something very, very important in it. And I will show you today one more example. But before that, one of the other very interesting factors, I can see your questions. I will answer them a little bit later, if you don't mind. One of the other things which I find very interesting and which convinced me that Magi Astrology really, really works, not just because the book is called that way. Here it is. At some point, I was very interested in finding the astrological keys to success, to good luck, in the games of chance, in similar things, in casinos. And at that time, I found a book. It's a Kindle book. You see Nikolai James, Gambling, Luck and Astrology, Win the Maximum, Lose the Minimum. And I started reading it, and it's actually quite a substantial book. But what's most interesting about it is that the author says that he tried different things, but what really worked for him is what's recommended by Magi Astrology. Those aspects which they say will work for money. He goes to the casino, and when the aspect is precise, he was winning. He was winning a lot more than losing. So that also got me excited. And the problem with testing this approach is whenever I had good aspects, I usually was overloaded with work and I didn't have time to test them. And when I was ready to test them, I didn't have such good aspects. So I think if we come together, one of us will certainly have some good aspects, and we might try to experiment with this approach. We'll see how this will work out. One other thing I want to tell you, and this is something I discovered literally yesterday or the day before yesterday, when preparing for this webinar and reading about Magi Astrology, I found a note saying several times it was mentioned in discussion of marriages that when Saturn comes in a difficult aspect to Neptune, meets Neptune in a difficult way, often some death happens there in one or another way. And somehow that brought up in my memory the fact there is a very, well, you know, there is a very interesting and important and powerful, actually insightful, deep book, astrological book I will show you. It's The Moment of Astrology by Jeffrey Cornelius. It's an excellent book. I've read it a few times. I've written quite a few academic papers about it. I know it very well. And I remember from this book one story where Jeffrey writes about the mystery surrounding the natal chart of Princess Diana. The thing is, there were always two versions of Diana's chart. Originally was one version which Jeffrey calls Diana 1, but soon after that, the other version was introduced. And different people tried to contact Buckingham Palace, Diana herself, and they kept getting these two versions. Sometimes Diana, through some contact, would confirm that it was 2 p.m. Sometimes she would say, no, it's 7:45 p.m. And so these two versions of your natal chart, astrologers had always these two versions of them. And the funny thing is that when you start testing this chart with different events, with synastry with Prince Charles, they both worked. They both worked convincingly enough. So astrologers were really puzzled. And when that tragedy happened, when Diana died, they thought, okay, we will probably be able now from this event of your death to figure out which chart is true and which chart is not. But unfortunately, as Jeffrey writes in great detail in his book, astrology of her death didn't really show up convincingly. They couldn't see this tragic event in the astrological events. Jeffrey wrote here that he spends many hours, and probably thousands of astrologers were looking for symbolism, for appropriate symbolism, and they couldn't find it. And let me quote a little bit from this book. Jeffrey wrote, from the perspective of regular natal practice, it would have to be admitted that the astrology was oddly mute in this case and not really on. And another quote is from Maggie Hyde, who observed, we simply scrape the barrel with the mechanical application of methods and fragile interpretations, trying to figure out how astrology worked in this case, in the case of death of Princess Diana. Now, what I did, I had that feeling that astrology will speak to me this time, but I need to approach it in a very simple way, a la Magi Astrology. So what I did, I just took the 1st of July 1961, the date of birth of Princess Diana, and wrote down the planets, the longitudes and their declinations from the ephemeris, just from the line of the ephemeris. And I did the same for the 31st of August 1997 for the date of Diana's death, just longitudes and declinations. And then I started comparing them. And this is when I've got shivers running down my spine, because I found that Neptune, do you remember I told you about Neptune and Saturn in Magi Astrology book, connected to death? So at the date of Diana's death, transiting Neptune was in conjunction with her Saturn. But let me show you the charts. I apologize if you're not familiar with proper full natal charts of traditional astrology. I apologize, but I hope you will still understand a lot of what I'm saying. Actually, you don't need to know all those full natal charts with systems of houses to learn successfully Magi Astrology. But please follow me as far as you can. I think it will still be an interesting example for you. Screen share again. And a little bit clumsy, but still works, I hope. So because there are two charts of Princess Diana, I will consider both of them, but I will start from Diana 1 chart, as it was called by Jeffrey Cornelius in his book. It's for 2 p.m. So here in the upper right corner, I have the natal, the positions of a few natal planets written down, just for convenience and for to have them easier to read. And down here, I've got transiting Uranus and Neptune. So let's have a look. Here is Saturn, natal Saturn, 27 Capricorn, right? Look at this Neptune, 27 Capricorn. Isn't this already interesting? Death, okay. But not only that, look at the declination of this Neptune, 20 south. Look at this Saturn, 20 south. It's not just conjunction, okay? It's an occultation, which in Magi Astrology is called planetary eclipse. So they were bodily connected. They were not only connected in longitude, conjunction and longitude, they were bodily connected in the same direction. This is a lot more powerful than just a conjunction. Second, have a look at this natal Jupiter, 5 Aquarius, right? Now have a look at this transiting Uranus, 5 Aquarius, conjunction. How about declination? 19 south, 31 minute. Jupiter, 19 south, 31 minute. It's a parallel precise to a minute of arc, absolutely precise parallel. So it's again a conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter, but also it's a parallel, and it's again an occultation or planetary eclipse. So I started thinking along the lines of why these two planets are in occultation with two higher planets, because the higher planets, you know, they have this meaning of something which is beyond person's control. They're higher things, they're invisible. This is not something we can control, we can influence. They just come, it's like, you know, destiny. And now they're in occultation with two planets, Saturn and Jupiter. What's special about these planets, Saturn and Jupiter? Well, they were traditionally called chronocrators, the rulers of the time, right? They rule the beginning and the end. And interestingly, they're in the 4th house of the end of things. And Saturn rules this house. So that shows us some topic which is already more or less appropriate for this tragedy, for the event, but it's not specific, of course. And these planets move very slowly. Neptune and Uranus, they were here for quite a while. They won't pinpoint the specific dates when this happened. But let me show you something else. Perhaps the most, we won't consider the moon, okay? We are Magi astrologers. We don't know about the moon. But there is the most stressful configuration of this chart is perhaps this square between Venus in the 8th house, the ruler of the ascendant, right? This is Diana herself. And Uranus, it's a partile square, which means it is less than 1 degree away from an absolutely precise square. It is very precise. It is very important. And it's not just a square. If we have a look at the declinations of this planet, 1555 for Venus and 1424 for Uranus, they're quite close. It is a parallel, depending on which orb we use, but 2 degrees is a decent orb. So it's not just a square, it's a parallel as well. So it's a very powerful and prominent square. And it's related to the 8th house because Venus is in the 8th house. So how do you think, and the most stressful configuration in the chart, how do you think if we expected astrology to show us that the person died on this day, would we expect this square to be triggered? I think the answer should be yes. And if it was triggered in a violent accident happened, right? Which planet we would expect it to trigger? How do you think? Would it be reasonable to say it was probably Mars? Wouldn't it? Do you agree? So let's see where Mars was on that day. Here it is. Longitude doesn't tell us anything. It's 10 Scorpio. But look at this declination. And look at the declination of Venus. It's a precise contraparallel, which became precise during the day of death. It shows the day. It shows precisely the day of death. And contraparallel, if you don't know, traditionally, you can read this in William Lilly, in other traditional astrology works, parallel and contraparallel are likened to conjunction and opposition in their importance. They're just abandoned, forgotten in contemporary astrology, but traditionally they were some of the most important aspects. It would be the same as to say that on the date of death, Mars made an opposition to Venus, except this is not an opposition, this is a contraparallel, which is more or less the same. So didn't astrology speak to us? Didn't we have an appropriate symbolism? How do you think? It's just maybe the problem and not in astrology not speaking to us, but in us not listening to it. In us closing our ears because we don't know what parallel is, what contraparallel is. But yeah, this is just one version of Diana's chart. Let's have a look at the other version. What will be different here? Again, there are planetary positions in the upper level and transiting positions here below. What's different here? We still have the occultations of Saturn and Jupiter. It's the same. There's still the chronocraters. Saturn doesn't use the 4th house here, okay. But Jupiter is very interesting. Jupiter is the ruler of the ascendant. In this chart, Jupiter is Diana, okay? And Venus is not in the 8th house here, but Uranus is. This square, Venus-Uranus, is still determined towards the 8th house. It's still related to death. And do you remember that Uranus from the 8th house in this chart is precisely in parallel up to the angular minute with Jupiter, Diana. It's in conjunction and occultation and in precise parallel with Jupiter. Isn't this meaningful? And of course, we still have to pinpoint the day, the same Mars, making a contraparallel to Venus, which will still work no matter which chart we use. So what I want to tell you, what I want to show you in this case is that although Magi astrology, yes, it's a simplified kind of astrology, but it can be an eye-opener even for the most sophisticated of astrologers. In this particular case, we just used parallels, which are highly prized in Magi astrology, and they just opened, revealed the symbolism, which showed, pinpointed exactly the day of the tragedy, and the symbolism was appropriate. It was Mars. So even if you are an experienced Western astrologer, what I'm saying is that Magi astrology, its approaches, its findings can be very important for you. They will enrich your understanding of astrology. They will help you to be more successful in your predictive work and perhaps in understanding what happened in the world. This is it. This is what I wanted to tell you during this webinar. Let me have a look at the questions I've got here. How does this compare with the software sold by the Magi Society? That's a good question. To be honest, I don't really like the software which is used by Magi Society. I have to use it when I need to find out something specific, such as Quad, because other software won't find it. But for the mainstream things, for finding those super aspects, for finding parallels, you can use pretty much any other. What I don't like about the Magi astrology, the interface, how things are drawn, it's just, you know, a matter of taste. But what technically I don't like about it is they don't have, or didn't have the last time I tried it, they didn't have the database of locations. For example, you need to enter longitude and latitude and figure out the time zone. So it's a bit primitive, actually, this data entry facility. And because the way how things are displayed is a little bit complicated and difficult for me, I prefer to use the normal mainstream software packages, just to set them in such a way, to use the proper orbs in them, to use the proper aspects. And that works for me most of the time. And if I need to find something specific, I will go and use the software of the Magi Society. Did you attribute other, Marlene asks, did you attribute other transits or progressions to the study, travel and employment opportunities at the time? Were you paying attention to, not really 100% sure about, maybe if I read this question earlier, I would understand it better, but I've followed after that story with Chiron trying Jupiter. Maybe what's asked whether I followed other aspects from Chiron. I did, yes, and I find that my best opportunities I had here while working in the UK came when I had aspects of Chiron. For example, suddenly I was working on some project where it was good, but it wasn't paid that much, and then suddenly a guy for whom I worked in the past approached me on the email and told me, you know what, we need an iPhone developer in our company. Would you come and join? We pay you the good rate. And I would just go to that company and work there for a year and a half. Things like that were happening. Very interesting. Yes, all the webinars will be recorded, and actually the system I'm using now, I'm not 100% sure if I will keep using this system. There are some certain aspects of it which I'm not sure about, but any contemporary system basically will provide a recording of the webinar automatically. So don't worry about it. And I will have the recording at all times. And even if the system doesn't work automatically on some reason, you will contact me and you will have the recording. The recording will be always there. That's guaranteed, basically. Well, as far as I can guarantee these computers and all this shebang, but I will do my best to provide the recording. Yeah, a link to watch this again. You will get this link after this webinar will end. You will automatically get an email saying thank you for attending the webinar, or those who didn't attend will get this link. Sorry you didn't attend, and each one of them will get this link to the webinar we are running right now. Yes, also the plan is, once I have the recording of the webinar, because I also have the slides, okay, and those slides can be valuable. Also, I have a pretty much detailed write-up for this webinar. Not everything, but for example, the story of Princess Diana, I have quite a detailed write-up for it. I could provide those. So what I'm thinking, the system I used for my astrological forecasting for everyone course is called Teachable. It's teachable.com, and it's quite good. It's probably one of the best systems for online courses. And there I have like a high resolution video and all the handouts linked under that video, and even some mini forum for questions and comments underneath. So what I'm planning is to create a course with recordings of these webinars, and those who will attend all the webinars will be given access to that course and to all the materials and handouts and everything. And I think that will be even better than to have these recordings, because that will be a complete systematic material. And I will price that course, like, first, when there is only one webinar, it will be priced at $30. When it will have 2 recordings, it will be more and more expensive, and gradually it will come to some. So it will cost all the webinars taken together, but probably with some discount. But that's we'll see how it will go. Marlene asks whether I attributed. Yes, I was following Chiron at that time. I was when applying to Scottish University, I already knew about this trine, and I was just trying to figure out. But you know how it happens. You remember about this trine, but not all the time. It's not that I remember, okay, I have this trine from Chiron, I have this trine from Chiron, so I can try this, I can try that. No, it doesn't work like this. Sometimes you recollect, oh, it's a miracle, but you know, I have the trine from Chiron. I knew about the aspect, but I can't say that I decided to travel from Moscow to Glasgow because I have this trine from Chiron. Because if you read this description of the trine from Chiron in this 3rd book, let me try, if we still have some time, let me find the description, because they have an interpretation, if I will be able to find it quickly enough, what it says, because I found this description quite inspiring. But it wasn't telling me that, okay, during this aspect, you will travel across 2 seas from one country to another, driving your car. Let me delay this. I don't want to waste your time right now. I will find this interpretation. And if you will come tomorrow for that aspects webinar, I will have that interpretation ready, and I will read it for you. By the way, that's important. I think these 2 books, Astrology really works, and the key to success in love and money, maybe not complete books, but pretty much of them you can find for free online if you check magiastrology.com or maybe some other Magi Astrology websites. I think I saw some mention of them. I don't need those free copies because I have these paper copies with all my notes and marks. But if you want to have a free copy, I think you can, because these books, some of them are available on Amazon, but because they're out of print, they're horribly expensive. I saw this Love and Money book today and it was like £72 here in the UK, quite expensive. Mike is asking as well, were Diana charts Geo or Helio or both? They were Geo. Those are traditional astrology charts, geocentrical, nothing Helio, just traditional stuff. You will have the slides in one or another way. Keep in touch. I will provide all the information and slides. I will just need a little bit of time to. I will probably. Well, I will figure it out how to share all the materials with you. Just give me a little bit of time. Can you recommend a good astro chart for free to get an overview of one's life? Astro chart, I don't know what you mean by astro chart. What I can recommend you is a good, very good astrological software which is free. Because normally, if you want to create a natal chart or some astrology chart, and you don't have a software, expensive software like SolarFire, you usually go to that website astro.com, for example, or to astrolabe.com, and create a chart online, which is a bit limiting and not convenient. There is a great, absolutely great software package which you can download from the internet for free. It has 3 versions. The light version is completely free and fully functional, and then there is a pro version and a geo version. Those are more expensive, still quite cheap. The guy is a Russian programmer, and when I was writing my astrology book in 2001, I was referring to this software he distributes, and I'm now creating a new edition of that book, and I'm still using this software. So it exists for decades. It's very reliable. It's maintained and supported. It's amazing. It's amazing what you can get for free. I will just give you a link. Thank you, Fairy Dust, for joining for tomorrow. Thank you very much. So this is the website. You can get a free astrological software, very good astrological software. And I might be showing how to use it to do some major astrology work to you in the future webinars. That might happen, because not everyone has SolarFire, I understand that. Let me see what other questions we have here. The first paid webinar will take place tomorrow. Then the next one maybe a week and a half after it, and then gradually we'll come up to speed and we'll go. I think there will be 10 or 12 webinars for sure, more than 10. I'm sure about that. So thank you very much. You will get the recording, right? If you won't, email me, but I think you will get it for sure. I've got it already, actually. This is from the previous webinar. Anyway, you will have it. It's automatic. And I hope to see as many of you as possible tomorrow on the first webinar, Aspects and Magi Astrology. Thank you very much, and goodbye.